The failure to act with sufficient ambition to avert the climate catastrophe will be the greatest moral failure of our time.
Making changes takes courage, and if we don't change things, we won't have a future.
I'm an environmentalist. A lot of people don't understand that. I think I know more about the environment than most people.
You have stolen my dreams and my childhood with your empty words. Change is coming, whether you like it or not.
Zero Carbon
East Talk.
Hello and welcome to the next episode of Zero Carbonista. I'm Ian Collins, and of course this series is all about the campaigns, ideas, thoughts of Dale Vince, the entrepreneur whose success is firmly in the green energy sector, the owner of Ecotricity, the world's first green energy company, and of course lots of opinions and views outside just running that. One of them is football. We might come on to that in just a bit. He is of course the chairman of Forest Green Rovers, currently doing well in League Two, and of course we are here to answer some of your questions along the way as well. Dale, hello.
Yeah, morning.
I think we should just I think this sums things up. So I'm assuming you didn't wake up a happy man this morning.
I woke up quite happy because I went to bed, reasonably early. The exit polls had just come in indicating that the Tories had won, and that was enough for me. I went to bed, didn't think about it again, woke up fairly happy, and then I've gradually found out the results through, the more detailed results throughout the morning. And, it's not the end of the world, although it's not going to help us avoid the end of the world, in terms of fighting climate change. And I always look for an upside, a silver lining in every circumstance. And, we do have to kind of dust ourselves off and re-engage because this is our house. We live here, and, these foolish people are in control for the next 5 years, but that shouldn't deflect us from the agenda. There's really important work to do. And I do think that actually Boris Johnson now is completely in control and has nobody else to blame, and all of his chickens are going to come home to roost. He's got to, quote, get the economy motoring. He's got to, quote, get Brexit done. And he's got to do all of these things that he said he's going to do. And, come the next election, and it will come, then, there'll be a big test for him. There's nobody else to blame.
Yeah, so I was wondering this. Let's just remind ourselves how the news was broken.
It is 6 minutes past 5 in the morning, and we are now in a position to say that this election of 2019 formally has been won by the Conservatives.
And when I heard that, Dale, I thought of you. You were one of the first people I thought of, because I thought, actually, you're a problem solver. You're a person that's looked at conundrums. You've looked at what people have said, well, that would be impossible to do that, or you can't do that, or that's too expensive, blah, blah, blah. And I thought, well, if anybody could probably see some optimism in this or a way round it, it's going to be Dale Vince, because, of course, what struck me is that a lot of those Labour seats went purely because of Brexit. But fast forward a couple of years and the Brexit issue goes away, and that potentially leaves the Conservatives quite barren in some respects. And it's not a surefire bet that this is a shoo-in for the next 2 or 3 general elections.
No, I think it's the opposite, actually. I think they've become a single-issue party, and I think they avoided the blame for austerity because Brexit was front and centre. It was the mantra of the election for them, get Brexit done. I don't think Brexit will go away at the next election because I think it will have been shown to have been exactly what many people said it would be, a complete, well, let me say clusterfuck. And I think the Conservatives have to own this. And they won't be able to escape that. They won't be able to blame that on Labour or a parliament that wouldn't let them do what they wanted to do. They won't be able to escape, I think, the blame for austerity. Johnson's promises now of investment in public services and not selling off the NHS and not allowing chlorinated chicken and the lowering of standards to US levels, all of those have to now bear fruit. And I don't think that they will. And I do think that at the next election we could see a very different circumstance. Maybe we'll see a Labour landslide for the first time since, was it 97?
That absolutely could happen. You're not the first person to wonder about that, because although the headlines are quite damning to Labour, as we sort of all woke up to what is there, the way back actually might curiously be quicker than people think. This wasn't based on the fact that lots of people said, "Oh, we love the Conservative policy on the national health or the environment." It was just purely on this one. It seems in many of those seats, the Sedgefield, Stoke-on-Trent, etc., it seems that it was a kind of Brexit thing. Well, once that is sort of out the way a little bit, in whatever form that takes, then that potentially does leave them rather exposed.
Yeah, and I think Johnson is exposed. He's going to be hoisted by his own petard, to use that expression, because he wants a no-deal Brexit. He's now going to get one because Parliament won't and can't stand in his way. He now has to justify that. Not now, but at the next election, he has to justify why that wasn't such a bad thing, and or he has to find an excuse for why it was bad, but it wasn't his fault. It was somebody else's. So I think he's got exactly what he wanted. And we will now see the extent to which everything he says doesn't add up, and the promise that he's made won't be delivered. We'll see that at the next election, and I think he'll be held to account for that. And the Tory party, who have become a single-issue party, I think they've become detached from the electorate generally, except on the issue of Brexit, when people were so fed up and just wanted it done. And I think that was the cut-through message, probably, that won them the election.
What about in terms of I was trying to think what the Tory environmental policy is. I would defer to you on
yes,
that, Dale. I'm sure that what could ensue
Get a
now
microscope
is like
30
30 seconds of radio silence, probably, as we examine it. But I know that you certainly haven't been. The Conservatives say, look, we're the most environmentally friendly than many other countries around the world. We've brought our pollution levels down more than any other. They use that line quite a lot. I don't know if that's true. You probably do know whether it's true or not. But what broadly speaking, is there anything for you, as somebody who campaigns on this stuff, to be excited about the Conservatives?
Silence.
There was the predicted silence.
Yeah, I mean, look, what's the Tories' environment policy? I think you need a magnifying glass to find it. Look at the climate change leaders' debate on TV. Boris Johnson didn't turn up. That's the Tories' policy on the environment. That's their attitude to the climate. They can find a bunch of stats that says, yeah, we're pretty good, we're one of the world's leading countries. We've got this amazing target of zero carbon by 2050. That's only 20 years too late, but they gloss over that. A lot of the progress on renewables was made under Labour. The big push into offshore, the renewables obligation, and all that kind of stuff. They've taken a lot of credit for that. Even though they shut down the onshore wind and solar industries, they still claim to be a renewables-friendly government. They of course are not. The moratorium on fracking that they announced before the election, that will now be lifted, and fracking will come back. This is the least green government that we've ever had, and Cameron was very ungreen, but Johnson, I think he'll add to that.
It's interesting because one would assume he's hoping for, he wants this. He's got this 5 years, potentially 5 years, but he would probably dearly love another 5, because that would put him up there as a longer-serving Prime Minister potentially than Thatcher. Now, if he got that, he surely, from his own vanity perspective, I know we've sort of touched on this before, he doesn't want to be the bloke that is the chief recipient of all the bad, irreversible news around climate change, because it would all fall in his lap, wouldn't it? So from his own self-interest point of view, you'd think he'd be a bit more on this.
I think he's a very short-term person. And I think he supported Leave. He was ultimately one of the chief architects of the Leave vote, but he supported it for his own short-term political interest. I don't think he expected to win it. Having won it, he then had to make a decent fist of it. I don't think there's any logical argument for leaving. There is no benefit for us to gain as a country from leaving, and that will be proven in the coming years. But he hasn't thought that far ahead. He jumped on the bandwagon that would help his own career. He's not thinking about climate change and what happens in 10 years' time. I don't believe so, not for a minute.
Let's look at some other news this week, and we start here.
Time Magazine's Person of the Year has just been revealed, and that person is, drumroll please,
who?
Greta Thunberg.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, she was
very
right
good
here.
choice.
Greta Thunberg, of course, has been named Time Magazine Person of the Year. I noticed, Dale, that it took Donald Trump about 2 minutes before he sort of sent out a disparaging tweet over this.
Yes.
If I was Greta, I'd take that as a badge of honour, I think.
Yeah, he's obviously jealous, which is amusing. The so-say most powerful man in the world, and probably that is true, is jealous of this schoolgirl climate campaigner.
Yeah.
For the accolade of being on the front page of Time magazine, and fair play to her. I imagine that she's herself not that impressed by being on the front page of that magazine. I don't think she's that impressed by awards and stuff like that. I think she's much more focused on what needs to be done, and not enough is being done, and that's an opinion I share.
She's a game changer, though, isn't she? I mean, I know she does divide opinion, but often that opinion is divided because of people perhaps like Donald Trump, etc. But in terms of mobilising a debate and accelerating a debate, I think we talked about this in one of the previous episodes. There was this girl sitting outside her own house as a sort of 14, 15-year-old at the time with a little placard talking about the damage that's being done. And you fast forward 1 year, and there's people in Tasmania going on strike because of this very issue. I mean, that's if you put that in a Netflix drama, people would say, well, that would never happen. But it absolutely
that's right.
did.
That's right. If you wrote it as a book, that would be a work of fiction, wouldn't it? But then, so would having a reality TV star, inverted commas, as president of the United States. You can't make that stuff up, can you?
He speaks well of you, Dale. Did you know that?
What, Donald Trump?
I keep looking at Twitter because I'm dying for the sort of exchange between you and Trump on Twitter. It's only a matter of time before that happens, I think.
Yeah, maybe. But yeah, I mean, Greta's had an amazing impact. There's no doubt about it. She's a very single-minded person, and it takes very single-minded people to bring change to the world. It does.
Here's some questions from social media. Tim Andrews on Twitter says, what do you think, Dale, of Coldplay's decision to stop touring? And of course, they cited environmental considerations on this.
Yeah, I think it's a bold, brave move. I think they're stopping touring until they can do it in a much more environmentally friendly fashion, if I understand it correctly. I mean, there are a lot of parallels between gigs and their big public events and football, which are big public events. Obviously I'm involved in that through Forest Green and through the United Nations as well, about greening up the world of sport. So I get where they're coming from. I think it's a brave and bold decision, and we're actually engaging with the music industry at the moment around how we can put on as close to carbon neutral gig event in Britain sometime next year as is possible.
Because football has come under some criticism, hasn't it, for that, because of places, far-flung places where the majority of teams have got to travel a ridiculous amount of air miles just to get to play in the first round of something.
Yeah, I think there was a particularly egregious example from last year where the two finalists played in Baku. I think they were both from Britain, England.
Right,
and that was particularly egregious. But the organisation behind that, which was UEFA, they seem to have taken a completely different approach to this year's tournament. Somebody was talking to me about it yesterday, actually, saying that it's going to be very different, and he wonders if it was due to the kind of kickback over Baku. I think it probably was, and they are signatories to the UN Sport for Climate Action Programme. I think they have taken all of this stuff on board, and they're doing something about it, which is fab. And sport can do something about it. Sport has a great kind of power to influence people, and it does at the same time have a responsibility to sort itself out, and it does have an impact, but that can be acknowledged and it can be addressed.
Sticking with matters football, Shelley on Facebook says, are you going to be signing any new players for Forest Green Rovers this January?
Yeah, we are. Not like a massive amount, I would think maybe 2 or 3. Something like that. Obviously, but for anybody that follows, as I say, obviously, but we're third in the league, so we're having our best ever season in League Two. We're almost halfway through the season. We feel like we're in a good place, but we'll be looking for 2 or 3 players in January, and let's see if we can get ourselves up into League One this year. That would be great to do.
Mark on Twitter, what next, Dale? Are you going to stand for Parliament? There's been a few people ask that question. That, bearing in mind your sort of your own backstory, your kind of campaigning ethos and everything you stand for is... I can't think of a worse job, by the way, in standing for Parliament. However, I can see why other people think it would be a good job.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure it's a good job. And, I spent most of my life thinking politics was a waste of time. And, I used to think that it was possible to bring more change by just getting on and doing stuff. So, I've been asked this question like before, 10, 15 years ago, and I'd say, well, look, I just think that, politics is a lot of talking and not so much action. And by starting a company like Ecotricity, I feel I've been able to bring more change and demonstrate, different ways of doing things. But I must say that in the last few years, I've started to reevaluate that when I've seen the kinds of people that are in power in Britain. I've seen the lack of experience and qualification for the positions of power that they occupy and influence over the affairs of our country. And I've thought to myself, crikey, I could do a better job than that. I'm better qualified in terms of life experience than that. And, I think I make more sense than a lot of people that are in power today. And it has crossed my mind that it might be more effective to try to operate in politics now than it is in business.
I can imagine the frustration. I can sort of see you sitting there on one of the green benches and, I don't know, Jacob Rees-Mogg giving one of his 2-hour speeches and you thinking, I can't do this anymore, sod this. Just clearing off to the bar or something, which I think most people would be inclined to do, perhaps.
Yeah, I can understand that. I used to think my biggest impediment was the dress code, actually, because it's something I bumped into in football as well, the need in some boardrooms to wear ties. But up until recently, you had to wear a tie in the House of Commons, but that's no longer the case. So at least that impediment's gone.
True. Vic on Facebook says, any good environmental tips for Christmas, Dale? Well, I guess one of them would be not to eat turkey.
Yeah, or don't do it, I would say. Christmas.
Cancel Christmas.
Just don't do it, yeah. I'm not the biggest fan of Christmas, I have to say. To a degree, I find it a little bit artificial, the happiness at one time in the year, the generosity at one time in the year, and then the environment and kind of animal rights kind of catastrophe that is in the background of that, I do find it all a bit strange, but it's become massively commercial.
Sure.
And I think that's the driver for it. So, at the risk of sounding like the Grinch, I don't want to spoil Christmas. I think that was his mission. That's not my mission. I just personally don't have a lot of attachment to it.
And we've just a final point. A few people have a pop at us after the last episode because, we did something really bad. I don't know if you're aware of it. We were remiss. We failed epically, Dale. We didn't play a Trump clip. Yeah.
Oh, no.
And apparently that's...
We mentioned him.
We did mention him, but we didn't... The appointment to listen for many people is when we play something like this.
You're going to have China and Japan and all of Asia and all of these other countries, addresses our country. Right now, we're at the cleanest we've ever been, and that's very important to me. But if we're clean, but every other place on earth is dirty, that's not so good. So I want clean air, I want clean water, very important.
Is there any part of you, though, when you hear him there, that you think there must be within the multifarious dimensions of this man, and anyone wants or desires the president. They often say that if you seek the job, you shouldn't have it and all that business. But particularly with someone like Trump, very different kind of president to previous ones we've had. Is there any part of you that thinks that somewhere in there, if I could chisel away with my big sledgehammer of logic into the thought process of Donald Trump, I would find a green thinker in there somewhere? I could talk him off that shelf.
I don't think you would find a thinker in there. Never mind a green thinker. Honestly, I don't think there's a thinker in there. I think there's a man that simply loves himself and lives for himself.
And on that point, Dale, we'll speak on the next episode.
Thank you, Ian.
And that's it for this episode. Don't forget, of course, you can subscribe for free from your own podcast provider so that you get each episode automatically. Make sure you leave a review as well. Really important bit. Make sure you follow Dale on social media, twitter.com/DaleVince, facebook.com/DaleVince. We'll see you on the next episode.
Zero Carbon
East of